Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is the first meetup that we're doing in a virtual. So I hope it's gonna be great. As always, our meetup are. So first of all, just for a small introduction, as we always do, uh, we we leave some time for people to join in. And in the meantime, I would just to explain a few things about our meetup. So basically, uh, yes, if we just the meetup is being created all around the Apache Spark. It is a very powerful library. So the idea was just to meet all together and share the pain and the joy to work on big data. This meetup is, can move to the next slide. Yes, so basically sharing knowledge and to grow some friendship and grow a network. And the meetup is has been it is an open community from the 2014. We grow a lot. Actually, we pretty shy now from 5 per person to reach the 3,000 people. So if you have some people, some friends that want to join a meetup, please tell them so we can reach this achievement. But it's always a great pleasure. We had a lot of talks. We have a lot of either international stars or also local stars that was coming to join our meetup. It was really interesting to see how many people are working and doing a very interesting job. So later, can move. So first of all, this is something we do usually. We ask you to raise your hand to tell us if it is the first time you join a meetup. I understand that now it's hard to raise your hand, but we try to use some technology here, and you should be able to see one question pop in your screen if everything works as planned. No. So there was the queue that quits. Okay, never mind. We can then move to the next question. Still, we have we do some. Yeah, there is no. The question is not appearing. Okay, never mind. We can go to the next slide. So basically, okay, this was just a good idea to get to know you, but nevertheless, when you join the meetup, then you were asked to give us a score. So it is always interesting to see which is your different experience. There are some people that seems to know very little about Spark. This is also very good because we want to give an introduction, but we also have people that is very experienced. So some people has 10 out of 10. So it's still good that we find interesting to join and learn something more. Okay, so okay, there's something that's interesting to remind you. There is we are using Slack for communicating between us. Is the idea was to create a community of people using Spark in Barcelona. So please, if you see this link, you can join in, and you receive an email to log in our Slack. And this is a great community. So please join in. And then next. Okay, so yes, this is time for the talks. Recommenders. This is a great honor to have Fernando López from Quantum. He's gonna tell us about a little bit about all the techniques that this goes around to find the right recommendation. And I think this is the right timing because we are spending a lot of time watching Netflix and on a social network these days. So now you can understand how this algorithm works. Is a great opportunity. But before to leave the stage to him, there are two things that we want to discuss with you. So if we could go on the next slide. So first of all, there is some rules that we want to set up for this meetup. So as I said, this is the first meetup we're doing. And if you want to talk and to have a question, you're free to do. So just you have to click on the end and then we will allow you to talk. So in any time, if you have something interesting to ask, you can raise your hand and then we will allow you to talk and do your question. Nevertheless, if you prefer, you can also type your question in the Q&A so everybody can see your question and then we can respond to your question in the end of the chat of the day. The chat should be disabled, so don't use it. I mean, I don't know if it works, but we won't be able to follow all channels, so please just use a Q&A or raise your hand if you have a question. And also, the Q&A is important because we are going to give to JetBrains license. So we're going to give his license to the people, to the person that will make the question with more likes. So when you submit a question, you can other people in the chat can upvote the question if they like or not, and then we can give a prize to you. So please give a look to the Q&A and also upvote the question that looks more interesting to you. Okay, I think that's everything from my side. So I'm very happy to go to mute and leave the stage to Fernando. Okay.
Thank you, Cesare. And welcome, everybody. First of all, I think that at least some of you have been able already to fill in the poll. So don't be shy and keep on answering. And let's start with our main topic. My name is Fernando, and I'm working for Quantum from Barcelona. Here with Gonzalo. You can see Gonzalo in the fourth picture. Gonzalo is also in this meeting. He's with us.
Everybody.
And we wanted to put a few pictures of other members of the team that have participated with us in this topic. I have been working for Quantum for the last 25 years, doing many different things in different countries, along the Americas and also Europe. And in the last 5 years, I focused in big data. Actually, I lead the big data practice and the cognitive computing practice. As part of that, one of the most relevant topics is recommendation, something that actually is not new. It comes from the era of data mining, now the so-called data science. And we will try to give you a hint of what we do about recommendation and which would be the best practices for you. Again, don't be shy, post your questions. You can earn a JetBrains license. And let's move forward. Okay. We will be talking a little bit about us, what we're doing here, what we do in Quantum in data analytics. We will give you a quick introduction about recommendation and a few important concepts that you need to understand before diving in. And then we will go into more detail a little bit, talking about different recommendation system models, the most popular. It's good to point out that even though we are talking about this, mainly about three recommendation paradigms, most of the ideas that you can come up with can be aligned to these models, okay? So this is a broad coverage of what you can do with recommendation. But in the end, you will be using content-based or collaborative recommendation, or a mixture of them, okay? Okay, let's give a few words about us. Quantum started as an IT company over 40 years ago in Montevideo, Uruguay, where we come from with Gonzalo. And currently we have a number of offices spread among the Americas. We like to say that our headquarters is in Montevideo, but this is just because of our heart. Because actually there are big operations in the other offices, and now we are starting to do stuff directly here in Barcelona. Quantum is composed of 400 consultants, as I said, and a subset of Quantum is devoted to data and analytics, where we belong to with Gonzalo. In data and analytics, we are over 70 consultants in Montevideo, Uruguay, and within data and analytics, we have a practice, which is big data and cognitive computing, as I said a few slides before. So what do we do in data analytics? Well, as you can see here, we help to do analytics and human judgment and decision and action in from different perspectives. Traditional business intelligence comes from descriptive analytics or diagnostic. So it is related to analyze what has already passed. Now, in these days, when we talk about big data and data science, we are moving more to predictive analytics. What will happen? And actually, recommendation systems have to do with this, with prediction. Prescriptive analytics has to do with what will happen and also enables decision support and decision automation. Okay, and at the top of this, we have a cognitive and artificial intelligence, which come to enlarge or improve what they have been doing with predictive and prescriptive. So we will try to apply some ideas from data science and from artificial intelligence also in this presentation. Okay. No questions still here? Okay, no questions. Oh, just before moving on, a quick mention. We are recording this webinar, so it will be posted for everyone to view it again. We are sure that you will like it so much that at least you will like to see it 3 times, so it will be available. Okay, let's talk about recommendation. I guess everyone is already familiar with some form of recommendation when you're going to buy an item, in this case a book. You are given some hints, and in the last years you have experienced probably that this recommendation is getting more and more intelligent, so to speak. And there's a reason for this. There's a reason for us as IT professionals to take care of this, because there are business needs that can be satisfied with this tool, recommendation, to help users to find the best match. A user can find the item he's looking for quicker and with a better match, which ends in a better experience. Also, it can help to improve sales, either in terms of conversion ratio, which is the distance between offering and actually making the sale, and also to enable cross-selling or upselling. Of course, customer fidelization is a consequence of improving customer experience. Let's move on. So, a few examples that probably you already know. You have YouTube, you have seen one video, and now YouTube offers the next video that you should see. You couldn't miss this video. The same idea as Netflix or Spotify when it comes to music. Amazon about selling every stuff, and also AliExpress more on the retail side. And from these examples, you can notice that when you are offered a recommendation, there is a justification behind that. Why I am being offered this item? Well, it could be because you liked that one, or because in the past you purchased those items, or because these are the best sellers, and so on. But usually you came up across one of these 4 items. Which are interesting variables when we talk about recommendation? Well, the list can be endless, but just to give a few examples, we can have an item taxonomy. It is very useful to understand how items are organized, how they resemble to each other. Yeah? In the same way, you can have a customer taxonomy. Also the buying history, or even the click stream, what you have been doing in the site, can give information about what would be the best next action for you to offer. Which items and events are available. In this case, we are showing a map, and this corresponds to show recommendations. We are recommending events like cinema events, theater, sports, and where are they happening. So the item and event availability is very important. And there is a calendar, there is geographic information that pertains to each event. Also the type of the weekday, because the recommendation needs to take into account some behavioral aspects, like is this a weekend? What you will do in weekends? What you typically do on weekends or weekdays? And what about the weather? I will not recommend you to see a football match, probably, if it's going to rain. Okay, these days it's difficult to recommend a football match, but you know, this will pass away. Okay, an example. This is a picture from the site of the North Face, jerseys and sportswear. In this case, you have a personal assistant that asks you, are you looking for clothing for male or female? Which weather, or where are you going to where are you planning to travel, or in which part of the year? So actually, this is kind of a bot or guided, assisted by. So it is actually getting the variables from you. You speak or you type the input, and then it recommends you the most appropriate clothes for your journey. Okay? No questions so far? Okay, let's move on. I don't know if anybody already has listened about the Netflix price. I guess many of you have done, but it's good to mention in situations like this presentation, because it has to do with recommendations. You know, in the past, Netflix offered a price for the better algorithm that could improve at least in 10% the match of the recommendation, of the recommended film. So if the guessing and matching of the film that you will see is better than 10% of the current performance, then you could get a prize. The #1 prize was a $1 million prize. So here you can see the winners of the latest contest. Actually, there was a team that offered the best solution, and with 20-minute difference, there was another team with another best solution. So it was a very intense race. But the moral here is take care with privacy issues. A few months after this prize, a couple of students from, I think, Texas University in the US proved that they could de-anonymize data to, up to a certain point, and in some way identify who were the users in the data set for the contest. So they were able to say things like, hey, this user is communist. Hey, this user is homosexual. Hey, this user has that ethnic group, and so on. So this, of course, ended in courts, and there was a lot of run about this issue. And actually, Netflix is not offering this price. I don't know if it was because of this matter, but the moral here, as I said, is beware of the data set when you recommend, because it could be exposing identity stuff, okay? Now, let's talk about the most important models. Broadly speaking, we will have 2 or 3 categories. As I said when we started, we can map many recommendation ideas to these 2 main approaches, okay? Let's start with the easiest, the generic recommendation. Imagine that you don't know your customer yet, you don't have any information. Which would be the items that you recommend first? It could be the top sales, it could be the best reviews, or it could be the newest items. Or on the other hand, maybe you have a lot of items in your stock, in your inventory, that you want to move to clearance. So there you would offer that all the mobile phones first, for instance. So this is what we say rule-based. Okay? We will speak about 3 main families of recommendation system models: content-based, collaborative, or hybrid. Hybrid is actually a combination of content and collaborative. And within these 3 broad families, we can come up with inventions. And we will talk about this in the next slides. Let's talk about content-based recommendation. Content is about knowing the items. So if I know that you liked that item, then I will probably recommend an item that resembles that one. I think I'm receiving a question here, sorry. I see we are receiving the questions in the chat. Maybe let me clarify. You can post questions in the question button that you have in your Zoom client. Please find the question button. Anyway, no problem. If I find a question in the chat, I will try to answer it. But maybe the question goes by, I don't see it. So it's better if you post the question using the question button, okay? I have a question from Eduard. When does the generic recommendation fit with the recommendation models? So let's go backwards. So this is kind of apart from the 3 models. Generic is like something that you can say without inventing any algorithm, because you don't know your customers, you don't know much about your items, except that they have good reviews or they have good sales, but you don't know how much it resembles to another item, or you don't know about the community of users. Okay, I don't know if this answers the question. Anyway, Eduardo, feel free to ask. Okay, this is the proper way. Can you see the question and answer? Okay, here's my vote, because this is the first question. So bonus points. Okay, let's move on. Content-based recommendation. Let's suppose that I want to sell mobile phones, okay? And maybe I am a fan of Android phones, or I am a fan of iPhones, okay? So that's a first characteristic of the item. So I am saying something about the content. Probably this user will stay within the same phone family. I'm talking about the content. I am describing the item, okay? So I am using features that pertain to the item. This is when we talk about the content. So it is important to take into account user feedback. Sometimes we can leverage ratings or preferences, something that is the voice of the user, and this is what we call the explicit feedback. Okay, but if we don't have this, we can still use some feedback, which we call implicit, that could be the number of hits of that item or that page, and the click string, that, as I said before, or maybe I need to take into account what is the noise around that, okay? But it is important to understand the difference between explicit and implicit. Explicit has to do with the actual intended expression of from the user. Implicit is something that I infer. That's the general approach, the general idea, sorry. There is a number of advantages when we talk about content-based recommendation. It is easy to understand, and so it is easy to justify. Because I am just saying, okay, you are an iPhone buyer, probably your next phone will be an iPhone. And this is quite easy to explain, even to the business. Here's another question from Francesc. Which kind of feedback do you prefer to generate better recommendations? Okay. I prefer explicit, but I don't have explicit all the time, because explicit is a plus. I can always try to fetch implicit. I can find a way to get some implicit information, but explicit needs some additional action. I need to prompt the user for information. Also, this question is very good because it prompts me to clarify something. Explicit information, you need to take care of this, because now we know that we have bots or fake preferences, and this is something that you need to be aware of. So even if I say I like explicit, you have to take care, because you don't know who, if it is a trusted user or not. So that is something that you need to take into account. Okay. So I said content-based recommendation is easy to understand, easy to justify, and it implies the notion of distance, of proximity. So if I have 200 mobile phone models, somehow I need to come up with the definition of distance. How close is this model to this other one? So this is what we call the proximity notion. And we will talk about this in a few minutes. We have another question from Diego. How do you weight each when you mix explicit and implicit? That's a very good question. I don't have a generic answer for this. It varies a lot in each case. Probably when we go into some examples, this comes up again. I would say you need to evaluate how feasible is to get the explicit trusted feedback against how real is the implicit feedback. If you use explicit or implicit, then in either way, you will need to evaluate the model, how good it performs. And it is possible that in a first run, you take both. In a second run, you give more importance to implicit, for instance. So you need to test. Sorry, Diego. So which are the problems or disadvantages with content-based recommendation? In the simplest form, we are not taking into account the popularity because we are only describing the item. So if a mobile phone is very popular, I am only looking at the closest, at the most similar phones in order to recommend. I am not taking into account the popularity. In other words, I am ignoring the community, okay? And this is a problem. And there is also a bias that is something that we cannot avoid with this method. If we have an item that is very far or is very different of the current item of the user, or I'm looking, remember, I know the user, I know the items that he has already bought, I know the item history. If I have a very nice item that is too far from his history, then I will not offer this item using content-based because the big distance, okay? Okay, a bit more about distances. Before talking about how much two items, how much similar two items are, I need to describe them in terms of variables. How do I represent these items? And then we talk about variables. In the case of the mobile phone, I can say how much memory, how good is the processor, how good is the camera, and so on. In other cases, I need to create artificial variables or representations of the variables, which we will call embeddings. This is like representing the items into vectors. We will see some example of this. And probably I need to reduce the number of variables. Maybe I can describe an item with 200 variables. That's a lot, 200 dimensions. Probably I want to to work, if I want to see, then I have to reduce to 2 or 3 dimensions. So we are human, sorry. So dimensionality reduction is not only for simplifying the problem, but also to having a visual perception of the problem, okay? Okay, now that we have the item representations, when we talk about distance, how do we measure distance? Well, there's a number of metrics. The most popular are Euclidean and cosine, but we also have Mahalanobis, Manhattan, there's a number of distances. These two are the most important. Let's say that Euclidean measures which is the actual linear distance between 2 points, between 2 items, okay, in a hyperspace. And cosine measures if 2 items are not close, but in the same direction. And cosine is very good when working with text, okay? For instance, this is used a lot in enterprise search. We have a few questions here. Let me go through. Eduardo, isn't explicit ratings a measure related to popularity? Very good question. Actually, explicit ratings has to do with the feeling that the user has from the item. I liked this movie, then 4 points, 4 stars. So this is explicit. It's my declaration about how good the item was for me. From Cesare, which is a good dimensionality reduction technique? PCA, autoencoders, yeah, both, or TSNA. We will see a short example coming soon. Okay, and from Italo, which approaches can be used to deal with distances in categorical variables? If you're dealing with categorical variables, then probably a good thing to do is to come up with some sort of embedding. Well, actually, the easiest is you can represent categorical variables with the technique called one-hot encoding. I hope you know one-hot encoding. It's basically representing if this characteristic is present or not, or if this value is present or not. Or you can transform into embeddings, which is embeddings or neural network vector embeddings are an evolution of one-hot encoding. And then you can talk about a distance because you already have vectors, okay? Let's move on. In this case, this is a real example. We worked with Gonzalo recommending shows. We want to sell tickets for attending shows. And then we have a number of different choices for the type of the show in a broad sense. But each show can be described by a number of features. In this case, we have near 200 features because it has to do with the calendar, with the day, with the broad type of the show, but also with the description. And then we are talking about text. Yes, we can transform text into features and use this information. So we ended up with the team in about 200 variables, and we reduced these 200 variables to only 3 dimensions. In this case, we used PCA. We could have used autoencoders. We could have used TSNE, sorry. And then we verified that it matched our expectations. As you can see, soccer and theater are rather separated, and this is what we're looking for. So this is a kind of visually validating that that we are building the representation in a good manner. Okay? What if I have too many items to offer? Too many choices? Well, what I can do is reduce complexity, for instance, using clustering. Okay? There are many algorithms for doing clustering. This is only a few examples. The nearest neighbors, when you use the neighbors of an item to classify it, to see in which neighborhood it belongs to. Okay, that's one option. Another very popular option is k-means, or its variant k-medoids. And dbscan, sorry, is another option that I wanted to put in the picture, because in this case you see that k-means is not the better option. dbscan is good for when you have something like trajectory or contour or some kind of shape. Okay. In Spark, we can work with the nearest neighbors or k-means. Of course, you can say, yes, I can use pandas, scikit-learn, get out of Spark and use dbscan. Yes, you can. But native to Spark, you have nearest neighbors and k-means. Today, this may change, okay? More about content-based recommendations. In this case, we combine clustering and TSNE, which is another dimension reduction method, which is good for visualizing. It is mostly used for visualization. I have another question here. Cesare, from Cesare, is it still possible to understand what each dimension represents after the PCA? For example, if an item is a bit more on the left, what does it mean? Is it a bit more of what? Very good question, because let's go back to the PCA representation. So the question is, can I interpret dimensions in the PCA? It depends. If you, actually, when you do PCA, you get the eigenvectors and eigenvalues. You get a matrix when you can see how much each dimension plays a role when it builds up a value. This is when you build, for instance, the PCI dimension 0 here, the original 200 dimensions are participating in this one. They are linear combination, but you need to see the spectral decomposition, which is the matrix with the eigenvectors and eigenvalues. And then maybe if there is a very evident tendency, then you could have an idea, but it's difficult from PCA to understand, to have a direct mapping with reality, because usually you come up with a combination of the original dimensions that has is not very directly translated into reality. Okay, so it depends. Sorry. Okay, let's move on to collaborative recommendation. This picture actually, maybe it makes you think of a quite popular method from data mining, which is market basket. I don't know if anyone already has heard about market basket, but in essence, what it does, it looks within the tickets and sees which items are bought together very frequently. For instance, here we have customer 1 is buying milk, eggs, sugar, bread. Then milk, eggs, customer 2, milk, eggs, cereal, bread. Customer 3, eggs and sugar. So if you analyze this, then you can say that some items are bought together. So this is what we call the simplest form of collaborative recommendation, because we are examining what the community does. Okay. More about this shortly. Let's compare this with content-based. What do you think? How do you see this? There's a very important difference, because in content-based, you look for similar items. Okay? But here, we look for similar users, and we try to see or to get from this similarity how they behave when it comes to getting new items. So here we have an article that is quite close to the original one, then we recommend it. Here we see similar users, we see what the other user reads, and then we recommend. So the community plays a role in here. Okay. For example, as we see in the picture of the cars in the supermarket, the association rule, one of the form of association rule is the market basket, are based on the frequent item sets. Frequent item sets is an algorithm that actually does that. It finds the most frequent sets of items, or items that occur together. If this goes that, if this goes with that, then probably they will happen together in the next buy. Okay. Another example, if actually is a variant of the previous one. Markov chains looks for the status change or the state change of an item. For instance, if I have a mobile phone, I have a mobile phone A, and I want to buy a new one. Which one would you recommend? Well, let's see what the community does. If we see the community information, we see that users that have a mobile phone A, most of them, they go and buy mobile B or mobile C. And then you will recommend that to me. So what you're doing is you are looking into the last transaction. That's why we talk about Markov. Remember that Markov has to do with stochastic processes, or processes where we only care about the latest status change. Okay, just one for our case. Alternate least squares is a very powerful method which tries to estimate how users and items relate. So we will go into more detail in a couple of slides. But actually, this one, which is included in Spark, tries to build or tries to guess a matrix representation of the matches between users and items. Okay, more on this soon. ALS, it performs very well, usually. So it gives you a good score baseline. Currently, many of the examples that we have already mentioned when we talked about big companies using recommendation, for instance, Netflix, they are using ALS plus other things, but ALS is very important in their recommendation pipeline. Association rules, which is also present in Spark, usually is very easy to justify, and you can imagine why, right? And it is because the assertions that you make when you talk about association rules can be backed on actual facts because you have already measured which items go with which items. It's just a translation of the probability, okay? So quite easy to justify. Actually, association rules, you can express them as a collection of rules. If you buy A, then you will probably buy B, and you can state the number for that probability, okay? So which are the problems of the collaborative recommendation methods? How to handle new users. If I have a new user, I don't know the user, I can say nothing to this one, to this new user. I need to know something about him before recommending a new movie, okay? And also another problem is the cold start. You cannot apply a collaborative recommendation from scratch. You need history. You need a number of core base users and items in order to build your first matrix model, okay? You don't have these two problems in the content-based recommendation, if you remember, okay? Well, this is a Spark meeting, so let's show at least a few lines of Spark. In this case, PySpark from Gonzalo's hands. In this case, there's a code snippet for association rules. What we are doing here is we are using the method FP growth. This is at the core of the association rules. FP growth, you use it for calculating the frequent item sets and infer the associations, okay? It's just one of the many methods that you have available in the Spark ML, okay? So mostly what you are seeing here, when we talk about Spark, remember FP growth and ALS. Those are the most used algorithms within Spark, okay? That's when you talk about collaborative recommendation. When you are working with content recommendation, it's just matrix algebra and dimensional reduction, which you also have in Spark. Let's move on. Now you have a code snippet for ALS, okay? As I said before, ALS, what it tries to do is, imagine you have 3 users and 3 movies, okay? And you already have the information for some of these interactions. What you try to do with ALS is to guess the values for all of the matrix, okay? That's what the method does. So ALS is actually a method of estimating these coefficients. You get a subproduct, which is very interesting from ALS, which is 2 matrices. These 2 matrices build what we call the latent features. So what are these latent features? Well, these 2 matrices, which are actually the factors, when you multiply these 2 matrices, you get this one, okay? But each one of these is very interesting because it says how much each row resembles to the other, how much Ted is similar to Carol or Carol to Bob and so on. So it captures features, not in a direct way, but in a latent way, okay? So that is why we call it the latent feature between users and the latent features of the items, okay? Well, going back to Spark, you estimate the ALS matrix, and then you have a number of methods for actually performing the recommendation. it is important to notice here that you have a number of parameters. The most important is, I think it went out of the picture, it's implicit. You can tell Spark to use explicit or implicit information. And the algorithm is slightly different, but those are inner workings of the algorithm. Don't worry about that. Just bear in mind that it is important to tell Spark if you are dealing with implicit or explicit information that we have previously described, okay? I hope you can see this. This is, we wanted to put this picture. This is an example in a data science platform, 9. Probably many of you know it. But it's nice to see that how Spark can grab the features, and then you do the training, you do the split, then you build the predictor using ALS, and then you apply what you have just constructed. So more or less it's the same as we have already shown in the code, but in a workflow manner. This is available in 9, and you can download it and use it. Probably in order to learn about how this works, it's a good idea, okay? Okay. Let me tell you something. It's almost 8 p.m. and it's time for all of us to give us a couple of minutes, because you know that the community, all of us is going through a hard time. It's time to go to the window and give an applause and come back. So let's stop for a couple of minutes and then we will move on, okay? We will be back in 2 minutes. Okay, let's continue. Let's talk about hybrid recommendation, which, as we said before, it's a combination of the best things from both worlds, content-based and collaboration-based, sorry. So we will try to combine 2 or more recommendation methods to gain better performance. Netflix is a good example. Netflix actually is a complex pipeline of recommendations. So this picture gives you an idea of what we will usually do when we implement a hybrid recommender. We have an input, and then we apply the content, the collaborative filter-based recommendation. We then use the content-based recommender. We combine it somehow. There's the magic, and then we perform the recommendation. Okay. So this is not as complicated as it seems, because you can say, let me go back. Remember this slide when we said justification. Yeah? Will you like it? How many reviews? Okay. These are justifications. Okay. And when we recommend, we need to say why we are recommending this. Probably, if I am using a hybrid recommendation, you are interested in both ways, because you can say to the user, hey, I am recommending this mobile to you because you have been using this mobile in the past. And this one is very much like this one, but it's an evolution. Or you can say, probably you will like to go to this other mobile because the community is going to this other mobile in cases like you. It's the same as when you're looking at a Netflix picture and you are recommended because you liked or because other users liked. You can see this justification in the recommendation itself. But always take this into account. This is something that is not specific to recommendation, but it's something that we need to take into account. This depends much on the business. Maybe you are requested to give a clear explanation of why you are recommending that. The actual algorithms or methods that you're using have better performance, but worse explainability. So this maybe many of you have seen this picture before, but it also applies to recommendation. Remember that in our first slide, we talked about rules. Rules are very easy to explain, but they usually perform very bad because they pursue a very specific objective. Okay. A quick word about how to deploy this. Well, as in other data science problems, we need to define an objective. We need to understand the data, prepare the data. This is much like the CRISP DM, the diagram that is here. We need to select algorithms, train models, evaluate, and then deploy. Okay, and this is a cycle. The same applies to recommendation. Okay. Only that in our case, there is a very, very important distinction. We cannot, when we are developing, we cannot evaluate a recommender. What we can evaluate is a prediction. The recommendation can only be evaluated when the wheel meets the road. When we start to use it, when it goes live. And this is what we call A/B testing. Okay. How do we evaluate performance? As I said before, when we are developing, our recommendation method is only one more predictor. We are trying to predict how much we can guess about the next selection of the user. But the real performance evaluation, when we talk about recommender, is about how it does influence the customer behavior. So we need to put the recommender into production and see how the behavior of the user changes. That is why we talk about A/B testing. Okay, this is the most precise evaluation when it comes to recommendation. Some users A will be recommended an let's say a random option, and other users B will be recommended using the recommendation system. Then we compare how A and B perform, and then we can see how we have influenced the market or the users. Okay. And then we have the traditional measures from data science, the confusion matrix, precision, recall, F1, and so on. Okay. But I want you to take from this presentation that the most important evaluation is A/B testing. Okay. Okay. Let's see some reality examples. If there are no further questions. First example, you can guess from what we have already said that this is association rules or market basket. If I buy what is in the left column, then I will probably buy what is in the right column, and this is the probability and the number of samples in relative. Okay, so the support and confidence. Sorry, this is in Spanish, but support and confidence talk about the probability of this item set to occur, these sets to occur together, and how much we have seen it in the whole sample. Okay. In the second case, it's the same, but we are standing on two items, so the confidence is better here. Okay. That's the simplest example. Another one. This is an actual example from a customer. Actually, this was presented by Antel in another conference, and it has to do with this big telecommunications company, how to recommend your best next mobile. Well, here we are using Markov chains and clustering in order to determine a mobile that is close, and this is content, close to your actual mobile, and what the community is doing when transitioning. So we are using part from content and part from collaborative, you see? So telephones are grouped into clusters, similar phones, and then we recommend you to move to another cluster. Another example from Antel about ticket recommendation. Don't miss this show. Provided I have seen these shows, which would be the new one that I should see? Which one would you recommend to me? Again, here we can use content and collaborative filtering because we have the two perspectives. We know that you like that specific football match. Probably you're a fan of that football team, and we see how the community is behaving with this match. Or probably we take features from a movie, from a specific movie, and we use a cluster of movies and mix that with collaborative filtering. Now it gets a bit more complicated, but it's the same idea. In this case, we want to find the best documents for a medical case. In this case, we have natural language text, and we want to find which is the best document for us to read. In this case, we have already built a knowledge base which concept relations and the documents that are behind that concepts. So there is a notion of distance which is captured by a graph engine. Okay. Another question from Italo: how could you include temporal information in a recommender to go further to Markov chain? Let me see if I understand the question. Let's see. I can imagine two answers here, Italo. Temporal information has to do with your history. Probably you don't want to take into account your last mobile. Okay. In this case, Gonzalo? Gonzalo?
Sorry, I put.
Ah, okay. I thought you wanted to say something. In this case, it was interesting to only look at the last transaction because of the specific functional case of the mobile, okay? But in this other case, it is interesting to see the movies that, or the theater events, or the bands that you have seen in the last year, the kind of show that you like. So here actually we are taking a time window and selecting which are good candidates for us to infer what is good content for you. Okay, so I think this can answer your question. Yeah, I think this is it. Otherwise, Italo, ask me again. Okay. This was the example about the literature, and another example. In this case, we want to find the best candidate for a job or find the best job offering for a candidate. And what we do is we worked with text which was typed in by the candidate. And we compared the job and the text written by the candidate, okay? Here we have another methods. This was not just what we described in this presentation. Here we used another service, which is Personality Insights, which builds features from text, person features from text. Then you can see the features here, and you can see a text description of that features. So when we have features, we have a vector, and then we can talk about distance. If we have the vector person and we have the vector job, then we can find the best matches, the best job for a person and the best person for a job. That's it. But as you can see, you can go with recommendations in many directions. You can enrich these ideas of collaborative filtering and content-based filtering with other helper algorithms. Another one, In this case, we get a picture from a plant which has a disease, and we want to suggest which could be the disease and how you could treat it. But of course, you need to be in contact with a professional. This is just to give you a hint. So here we recognize the disease from the leaf of the plant, and then using rules. So in this case, we are using rules. Yes, we recommend the next action. Again, we are using another accessory method for recognizing the images and classify the images. Okay, from Italo. Italo says, actually, I'm thinking, for instance, Netflix. The last 24 hours of movies could be more important. Yes, definitely. That's a good example. The proximity in time is something that you need to take into account. When we talked about shows, in our case, we had information of 2 years ago, but we decided to give more importance to the shows that were more closer in time. And also it's important to take into account how further into the future you are recommending, because maybe you are planning your recommendation for the next month or the next 3 months or the next year. It depends much on each problem. But I agree in that for certain problems, giving a weight factor for the recency of the item in question can be a good measure. Yes. Okay. So those were some examples, but the list is endless. Just to give you a few ideas that we have seen around, recommendation can be translated into many other problems: similarity, optimization, classification, prediction. So these are families of methods that we can combine for recommending. Other functional examples could be the best school, or the best route, or where should I open the new company branch, which is the best place in the geography for this, which financial product best suits my interests and risk tolerance. So this is a form of which is the best next action for you, financial customer. Okay. Okay. I don't know if we have further questions. We have left these few minutes for that. Jason, yes. Okay.
Okay, that I think was a really interesting talk. We also had a lot of questions, but if you have more, don't be shy, please. And also, I think it is important that you give a score on the question if you can. So it would be nice that before finishing, you go and you put like on the question that were more interesting for you. So then we can give the prize, the best question. But also, of course, you can also just to remind that if you want to intervene, you can also raise your hand, so you can actually directly talk. So now I think it would be also nice to hear your voices.
We have another polling running, just to know what you're doing about recommendation.
Okay, so are you going to send the poll? Okay, we have one open question, new question.
Okay.
From Daniel.
Daniel, how would you mix different scores from two recommended systems, considering each of them are based in different user signals? That's a very interesting question. This happens also when you are solving recommendation via the hybrid way, because you have something that comes from content and something that comes from collaborative filtering. I tend to resist to sum up these values because I understand that they come from different dimensions and they provide you with different justifications. So probably the best thing to do is, if you cannot pack this into a single value, then you can give the recommendation as it is. According to these variables or according to this method, this is what I can assert. And according to this other one, this is what I can assert also. So it's not an easy one because you cannot just sum up factors that easily. So both of the factors can be available, and what I'm saying is respond both.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and then we can finish the webinar. And of course, I won't say that we're gonna finish the webinar. I saw that many of you were joining the Slack channel, so all the conversation can go forward, can continue there. It is open, and you can just join and make all the questions also like this. In the meantime, you can also have a peer by yourself, so we can do the peer on the Slack. I'm gonna send you again the link to everybody. So if you didn't before, you can join it again now. So let's give a few seconds if anybody is typing your question. Otherwise, but I think we can also call the winners for the IntelliJ license. I think that's the question that got more votes, were from Diego and also from Edward. So I'm gonna ask you to send me your email, so we send you the license. So just on chat, you can send your email to the attendees, so we can see and send you the license. It wouldn't be wise to send to everybody. It wouldn't work. Okay, I don't know if you want to say something else. I'm waiting for Diego and Eduard to. Okay, great. I have the email, so we're gonna send it to you. So we also have some prize. Okay, this is kind of weird. Usually we used to have all the people and everybody's clapping and thank you and thanking the speaker. It was a great talk. I really enjoyed it, and I think that also you enjoyed it because we had tons of questions. It was really nice to see you participating so much. So I think it was a success. And nevertheless, if you want to continue to talk, go on Slack, and we also gonna upload the video on YouTube. We're gonna send you the link on the to everybody by mail. So guys, thank you.
I want to
If
say
you want
thank
to
you
join
also
them,
sorry, I want to say thank you to Cesare, Ferran, and all the organizers for this chance of showing what we have been doing with Gonzalo and the team. So thank you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay.